So I want you to look down at this towering cyberpunk cityscape.
Oh, yeah, that image.
Yeah, it's just massive. Dark skyscrapers piercing upward into this hazy, smoggy, totally overcast sky.
Right. Very dystopian.
Exactly. And the only real illumination is coming from the ground level. There are these glowing, intensely orange lights of the traffic in the city grid, like way, way down below.
Way down there.
It's incredibly atmospheric, but it's also ominously cold. Humanity looks like an absolute afterthought in this picture.
Like they don't even matter.
Right. The scale is just monumental, and the people down in that traffic are just microscopic.
Just tiny dots of orange light.
Yeah. And I want you to really hold on to that image.
Yeah.
Because it came included with the source material we were exploring today, and it honestly stopped me in my tracks.
It's a powerful visual.
It is. It serves as the perfect visual metaphor for exactly where we might be heading. It's May 19, 2026, and the question defining our entire era is whether we are hurtling toward that exact picture.
A grim, hyper-centralized digital dystopia.
Exactly. Where the skyline is owned by a very, very select few, and the rest of us are just the orange traffic down below.
Right.
Or, alternatively, whether we have the capacity to illuminate that darkness and actually build a shared technological future.
Well, the visual language they chose for that report is highly deliberate. I mean, it frames the central thesis perfectly.
For sure.
You are either the architect in the skyscraper or you are the traffic. And the space between those two extremes is just completely evaporating.
Yeah, and that brings us to the foundational text we are diving into today. It's a really comprehensive, heavily researched analysis titled The Automation Shockwave.
Fascinating paper.
It really is. It was published by Podcaster.Capital.
Yeah.
And they actually stamped that cityscape image with their sleek PC logo in an orange accent that, perfectly matches the traffic light.
I noticed that. Nice design touch.
Right. Very clever.
Yeah.
So the core mission of this deep dive is to really unpack the total collapse of traditional white-collar stability.
Which is a huge shift.
Huge. We are looking at the realities of artificial intelligence essentially wiping out the knowledge worker.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, we are exploring the search for a post-work middle class.
Right.
And to be clear, right from the start, this analysis goes far, far beyond the popular mainstream band-aid of universal basic income.
That distinction is just critical because UBI has completely monopolized the socioeconomic conversation over the last few years.
Well, everyone talks about it.
Right. But the text argues that focusing solely on UBI is a fundamental misdiagnosis of the problem.
Wait, a misdiagnosis? How so?
Well, we are treating a symptom, income loss, while completely ignoring the underlying disease.
Which is what?
The underlying disease is a structural rewiring of the social contract. It's the collapse of human utility in the market.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this, because we really need to step out of that theoretical cityscape and look at the brutal, on-the-ground reality of the modern labor market.
Yeah, let's get into the realities.
For generations, there was this bedrock assumption baked into our culture. Basically, if you worked with your mind, your labor was uniquely human and permanently valuable.
People called it the cognitive moat.
Exactly, the cognitive moat. The whole idea was that physical labor could be mechanized, right? Like tractors and assembly lines.
Sure.
But intellectual labor, that was a fortress.
And that assumption was essentially the entire scaffolding of the 20th and early 21st centuries.
Yes.
I mean, white-collar careers represented stability. Mm-hmm. They meant social mobility and aspiration. The text specifically catalogs the professions that were considered absolutely bulletproof.
Like what?
Well, becoming an accountant, a lawyer, an engineer, an architect.
Oh, yeah. The classics.
Right. It lists doctors, professors, software developers, financial advisors. These are the protected class of knowledge workers.
And it wasn't just individuals making these career bets, right? Like, we built our entire societal infrastructure around this premise.
Oh, totally.
Think about it. The student loan industry, university expansions, urban planning, family economic planning, all of it assumed that cognitive expertise was scarce and immensely difficult to replicate.
Right. You had to study for years.
Exactly. It's like we built this massive, impenetrable medieval castle called a college degree, thinking a cognitive moat would keep us safe from the automation armies.
That's a great way to put it.
We pulled up the drawbridge and essentially said, hey, I have a master's degree in corporate law. The robots can't get me in here.
Yeah, but they did.
Right. But artificial intelligence didn't swim across the moat. It just flew over it in an airplane.
Yeah, exactly. The defenses we built were designed for ground war.
Ground war, yeah.
We were prepared for physical automation, robotics on an assembly line, self-checkout kiosks at the grocery store. We were completely unprepared for an aerial assault on cognitive reasoning.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it's vital to understand the technical mechanism of how this actually happened. Because it wasn't just like a gradual increase in computing power.
Right. It wasn't just computers getting faster.
No, it was the shift toward agentic AI frameworks.
Right. So we aren't just talking about a chatbot that writes a polite email anymore.
Not at all.
We're talking about large language models that are integrated into autonomous systems. They can actually chain tasks together.
Yes.
They can engage in semantic processing, run statistical analyses, query external databases, generate the necessary documents, and execute predictive modeling.
And they do it in seconds.
Error-free, and at a marginal cost that is basically approaching zero.
That is the core difference. I mean, think about the historical parallel the tech draws to the late 20th century.
Okay.
When industrial economies saw a massive loss of factory jobs due to automation and globalization, the blue-collar sector was just devastated.
Right, entirely hollowed out.
But the white-collar professions acted as a societal safety net. They actually expanded.
Oh, interesting. So they absorbed the shock?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They absorbed displaced workers
Yeah.
or at least provided a clear, stable path for the next generation.
So a factory worker might lose their job, but they could send their kid to college to become a financial analyst.
Precisely. That preserved the social order.
But now both sectors are under siege simultaneously.
Both at once.
The safety net is essentially dissolving. Like, if we look at a day in the life of a mid-level accountant today in 2026, the workflow has been entirely upended.
Completely transformed.
Historically, that accountant spends hours, maybe days, ingesting unstructured data from clients, doing reconciliations, running variance analyses, and producing summary ledgers.
Right. And today, the architecture of an AI agent handles that entire pipeline.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. The client uploads receipts to a portal. An autonomous agent with optical character recognition parses the unstructured data.
Wow.
It classifies the expenses against the most current tax code, which, by the way, it pulls in real time via an API.
That's wild.
It identifies discrepancies, drafts an email to the client asking for clarification on a specific deduction, waits for the reply, and then finalizes the ledger.
So what does the human even do?
The human accountant just reviews the final dashboard.
Which takes the human element from, 14 hours of deep work down to 12 minutes of high-level supervision.
Essentially, yes.
Or look at a marketing specialist.
Mm-hmm.
You used to need a multidisciplinary team for a campaign.
Oh, yeah. Lots of people.
You had copywriters drafting the messaging, graphic designers building the visual assets, data analysts tracking the A/B testing metrics.
A whole department.
Exactly. Now, you have a single director using a multimodal AI platform that generates the copy, designs the graphics, deploys the campaign, and autonomously adjusts the ad spend based on real-time analytics.
This introduces the concept the author calls the math of displacement.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, there is this popular misconception, often pushed by, tech optimists.
Right.
They say that these jobs simply vanish in a puff of smoke, or that they are replaced one-to-one by prompt engineers.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. Just learn to prompt.
Right. But the reality is a dramatic consolidation. It's a reduction in the actual number of workers needed to achieve the same or even greater output.
Consolidating the workflow.
Exactly. You have one highly adaptable professional armed with an enterprise AI system accomplishing the work that used to require a team of 10.
Okay. But if one person is doing the work of 10, the job title still exists, sure. But the pool of available seats at the table has shrunk by 90%.
90%, yeah.
And this leads to the most critical economic question in this whole scenario.
Who gets the money?
Yes. Who gets to keep the profits from that massive spike in productivity? Because that one accountant or marketing director left standing certainly isn't getting paid 10 times their old salary.
Definitely not.
I mean, their wage might bump up slightly due to their AI fluency, right? But the company is capturing almost all of the margin.
Almost all of it.
The firm's output goes way up, their payroll drops by 80%, and the surplus capital flows directly to the top.
Which transitions us directly into the most dangerous consequence outlined in the source text.
Digital feudalism.
The threat of digital feudalism. Because if intelligence is virtually free, the entity commanding that intelligence captures all the margin.
Digital feudalism sounds like a very provocative sci-fi buzzword.
It does sound like a movie.
But the analysis lays it out as an imminent economic mathematical certainty if our current trends continue.
It's just the math.
We are talking about a societal structure with a minuscule class of technology owners like the modern lords who own the compute in the models.
The lords of the manor.
Right. And then a shrinking professional elite serving as their vassals, and a massive population just fighting over the remaining scraps of service work.
You see, the true fear of AI isn't the Hollywood trope of rogue superintelligence deciding to launch nuclear weapons.
Right. It's not the Terminator.
No. The true present danger is silent and structural. It is the gradual compounding concentration of immense economic power into the hands of a very few people.
Just a quiet takeover.
Exactly. Capitalism functions because labor has leverage. You need humans to build the cars, write the code, and manage the spreadsheets.
Right.
Therefore, capital has to negotiate with labor, resulting in wages that allow workers to actually buy the goods being produced.
But wait, let me jump in here because I don't buy the doom and gloom entirely.
Right, go ahead.
Let's look at the historical trajectory of technology for a second. Look at the smartphone or genome sequencing or renewable energy.
Sure.
Technological progress has historically made things exponentially cheaper and dramatically improved the quality of life across the board.
That is true.
So if AI makes cognitive labor practically free, wouldn't that just usher in a post-scarcity utopia where goods and services cost next to nothing? Why wouldn't the cost of living just plummet alongside the cost of labor?
It's a really compelling argument, and the text addresses this exact techno-optimist defense.
Okay, what do they say?
The paper draws a sharp distinction between consumer surplus and structural leverage.
Consumer surplus versus structural leverage.
Okay. Yes. So the cost of generating a legal contract or a marketing video might drop to near zero. Consumer goods may become incredibly cheap.
Right.
But things with inherent scarcity land, housing, energy, clean water, healthcare access, they do not become free just because software is cheap.
Oh, yeah. I can't live inside an AI-generated video.
Exactly. More importantly, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text points to the early days of the Industrial Revolution to show how this transition actually plays out in reality.
Oh, Ingalls pause, right.
Yes, Ingalls pause.
The period where productivity skyrocketed, but wages essentially stagnated for decades.
Precisely. During the early Industrial Revolution, the introduction of mechanized looms and steam power created immense, just unprecedented wealth.
Sure.
But the early days were characterized by horrific suffering, brutal working conditions, and staggering inequality.
Right, because the workers had no leverage.
Exactly. The benefits of the technology did not naturally trickle down to the displaced artisans and weavers simply because cloth was suddenly cheaper to produce.
It took child labor laws, the labor movement, unionization, weekends, and massive public education initiatives to force that concentrated wealth to be distributed.
Yes. The technology created the wealth, but political and social friction distributed it.
And that is the function of the middle class, which the text spends significant time unpacking.
It's a crucial point.
The middle class isn't merely an income bracket, right? It is a sociological technology.
I like that phrasing.
Yeah, it correlates with democratic resilience, high social trust, economic mobility, and institutional legitimacy.
It holds everything together.
Exactly. When a massive swath of the population feels they have a stake in the system, when they have property to protect, and a reasonable expectation of upward mobility for their children's society remains stable, extremism is kept at bay.
But if that mobility vanishes and we move toward a permanent concentration of wealth, the paper warns of severe political polarization.
Like we're seeing glimmers of now.
We're talking about a massive acceleration of global populism and anti-elite movements.
Well, yeah, because if you have millions of highly educated, formally ambitious people who suddenly find their cognitive skills completely devalued by an algorithm.
Owned by a trillion-dollar monopoly.
Right, owned by a monopoly. They don't just quietly fade away into the night.
No, they don't.
They get angry. They vote for radical disruption.
Which is exactly why the tech industry has aggressively pivoted to championing universal basic income.
Because they see the writing on the wall.
Exactly. If you read the statements from the leading AI executives over the last few years, they almost uniformly suggest that the solution to capital concentration is simply for the government to cut everyone a monthly check.
So the Silicon Valley answer to the total structural collapse of labor leverage is just to put everyone on an allowance.
That is the UBI proposition in a nutshell.
Wow.
The logic is that automation-generated wealth will fund public stability. The AI systems do all the work, the corporations generate trillions in revenue, governments tax a portion of that revenue, and citizens receive a guaranteed unconditional payment to cover their basic needs.
Regardless of their employment status.
Right.
The text concedes that UBI might be a necessary emergency measure, like a shock absorber.
Sure, in the short term.
It would certainly reduce extreme poverty and soften the immediate economic shock of mass displacement, but as a permanent standalone solution,
it fails completely.
Yeah, the analysis utterly dismantles it. It calls the utopian vision of UBI a profound illusion.
The first major critique that text levels against UBI is the creation of absolute dependency.
Absolute dependency, yes.
Because if you don't control the means of production and you have no labor leverage because a machine can do your job better, your UBI is essentially modern-day bread and circuses.
Wow.
If the government is merely distributing a survival income while private corporations maintain total control over the AI infrastructure, democratic power completely hollows out.
You just become a dependent ward of the state.
Exactly.
But the state itself is entirely dependent on the tax revenue of a few tech monopolies.
There's no negotiation there.
Right. If the monopolies threaten to offshore their server farms or relocate their headquarters, the government has to cave. Because the government needs their capital to fund the UBI that prevents riots.
The citizen is left with zero agency.
That's terrifying. But the text goes even deeper than just the political mechanics. Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It explores the psychological crisis of meaning.
Yes, this is perhaps the most profound section of the report.
I thought so too.
It forces us to examine what work actually provides beyond just a mechanism for distributing currency.
Right.
We have reduced the concept of a job to a purely economic transaction, but it serves a massive psychological function.
It really does.
It provides daily structure. It forces social interaction with people outside your immediate bubble. It offers a sense of progression, status, identity, and crucially, a feeling of contribution.
I mean, think about how we socialize. When you meet a stranger at a dinner party, the very first question after what's your name is what do you do?
Every single time.
We forge our entire identities through the crucible of our professions. I'm a software engineer. I'm a trial lawyer. I'm an operations manager.
Right.
We define ourselves by the complex problems we are capable of solving.
So what happens to the human psyche when a machine can solve those problems infinitely better than you can?
Yeah.
The text suggests AI is forcing humanity into a collective midlife crisis.
A global midlife crisis.
Exactly. A civilization centered entirely on the Protestant work ethic and economic productivity is going to experience a severe psychological fracture when that productivity no longer requires human input.
If the answer is just, here is your UBI check, go stay in your apartment and consume digital media, stream movies, and play video games while the machines run the world, the human spirit just rots.
It degrades, yeah.
We are not evolved to be purely passive consumers. We need to overcome obstacles. We need to feel useful to our tribe.
That's biology.
Right. And the societal symptoms of a loss of meaning are devastating. We're talking widespread depression, resentment, radicalization, social fragmentation.
The text states it very bluntly. It says, the future cannot simply be. AI works, humans consume.
That's a great quote.
A sustainable civilization requires active participation and agency. People will rebel against a system that renders them obsolete, even if that system feeds them.
Which brings us to the pivot point of the entire analysis.
The big shift.
If we acknowledge that humans biologically and psychologically need purpose, struggle, and contribution, but the traditional corporate ladders are being vaporized by AI, we are left with a massive void.
A huge hole in society.
Right. So we have to fundamentally rewrite the definition of what society considers valuable work.
We have to decouple economic value, which is just market profit, from human value.
Say more about that.
Well, modern capitalism is operated on the assumption that these two things are identical. If an activity generates a profit, it is valuable. If it doesn't, it is economically invisible.
But the reality is that the most vital things that keep a society from collapsing don't generate quarterly profits for shareholders.
Not at all.
The text lists them explicitly, actually. Caregiving for the elderly and children, mentoring the next generation, volunteering, environmental restoration, artistic creation, community organizing, local democratic participation.
Digital ethics oversight and moderation, too.
Right.
These are the connective tissues of a healthy civilization. But our current market system rarely pays a living wage to perform them.
Yeah, the disparity is wild. A hedge fund manager optimizing an algorithmic trading strategy makes tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a social worker dealing with the fallout of a fragmented community struggles to even pay rent.
Exactly.
You know, I thought of a great way to contextualize this while reading the report.
Let's hear it.
It's like we've been paying exorbitant amounts of money for the flashy apps on our phone.
Huh.
You know, the corporate finance, the social media algorithms, the marketing optimization, but we've completely ignored the operating system.
Oh, the human operating system.
Yes. Caregivers, mentors, community organizers, teachers, they are the human operating system. And the wild twist of the automation shockwave is that AI might finally force us to pay for the OS because the AI is taking over all the app work.
That analogy holds up perfectly under the text's proposed solution, the civic contribution economy.
Civic contribution economy.
Yes. The author outlines a system where we move beyond passive universal basic income and instead institute public compensation for maintaining the fabric of society.
I mean, imagine your own life under this model for a second.
Okay.
What if you were compensated a stable, middle-class living wage to simply improve your local neighborhood?
That would be amazing.
Right. What if you were paid to care full-time for a sick parent, or to tutor kids at the local library, or to plant urban gardens, rather than grinding out pivot tables for a logistics conglomerate?
It completely changes everything.
How much would that lower the collective blood pressure of society?
It diversifies the meaning of productivity. It doesn't eliminate free markets or private enterprise. It simply states that maintaining our civic and social infrastructure is a formally recognized, compensated way to participate in the economy.
I love that.
The middle class historically existed because we distributed economic participation widely through corporate employment.
Right.
The challenge of the 21st century is recreating that broad distribution of participation without relying on the corporate 9 to 5.
But, and this is the multi-trillion-dollar question that always trips up these utopian models, where does the money come from?
Yes, the funding.
If we are going to fund a massive global public payroll for civic contributions, the capital has to originate somewhere.
It has to.
It has to come from the very machines doing the cognitive labor that humans used to do, which forces us to confront the most sensitive political issue in the entire document: who owns the machines?
And the analysis does not shy away from this. It introduces the concept of data as the new oil and insists that public ownership of AI infrastructure is the only viable path forward.
Public ownership.
Yes. Right now, the foundational AI models are entirely controlled by a handful of mega corporations.
If AI truly becomes the central engine of all global economic productivity, ownership isn't just a legal footnote.
No, it's everything.
It dictates the future of human governance. The text draws incredibly strong historical parallels to physical infrastructure. Think about roads, water sanitation systems, the electrical grid, and public health.
In the 18th and 19th centuries, many of these systems started out as private, localized monopolies.
Really? Like private water systems?
Yes, but societies eventually recognized a critical threshold. Certain infrastructure becomes too important to human survival to remain entirely in private, profit-maximizing hands.
Makes sense.
You cannot have a private corporation owning all the water in a city and deciding who gets to drink based on dynamic surge pricing.
Exactly. If the temperature hits 100 degrees, the private water company shouldn't be allowed to charge $50 a gallon just because the market demands it.
And AI infrastructure is rapidly crossing that exact same threshold of essential utility.
Right. If only a few private entities own the systems that generate the majority of the world's economic output, and they control the cognitive engines that businesses, hospitals, and governments rely on, wealth inequality will accelerate beyond our mathematical comprehension.
It's hard to even picture.
Therefore, the text explores several mechanisms governments must consider to socialize the benefits of automation.
It outlines things like sovereign AI funds, public AI utilities, cooperative ownership models, and citizen data dividends.
Yes.
You know, I was thinking about this, like the 19th century gold rush, the hardware manufacturers, the companies building the massive GPU clusters, they were the ones selling the pickaxes.
Oh, absolutely.
But the data they are mining, that's the land. And right now, these companies have just fenced off public land and started extracting the gold without paying for the mineral rights.
And what's fascinating here is that the mineral rights in this case are the entirety of human knowledge.
The models were trained on human data. Our collective histories, our books, our artwork, our public internet forums, our medical records.
Everything.
We are the resource that was mined to build the intelligence. The text argues that because the public provided the raw material, the public is entitled to an equity stake in the resulting productivity.
It's a massive shift in economic philosophy. I mean, traditional political debates usually center around taxation, right? Like, how much should we tax the billionaires after they've already accumulated the wealth?
Yes, exactly.
But this proposes actual public equity from the ground up.
The difference between punitive taxation and collective ownership is profound. The text points to countries like Norway, which manages its natural oil resources through a sovereign wealth fund.
Right. The oil belongs to the people.
Exactly. The oil belongs to the citizens, and the profits are invested to guarantee the social welfare of the country. In the AI era, data and compute capacity must be treated as a collective natural resource.
That makes total sense.
A sovereign AI fund would take an equity stake in the foundational models, or levy a compute tax that directly funds the civic contribution economy.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Sure.
If we nationalize data or turn AI into a heavily regulated public utility, won't that completely stifle the rapid innovation we are currently seeing?
That's the common fear, yes.
Because, I mean, bureaucracies aren't known for moving at the speed of a Silicon Valley startup. If we wrap AI development in government red tape, won't we just freeze technological progress and lose the geopolitical race to whoever regulates it the least?
The paper anticipates that exact critique. The argument isn't that the government should build the AI or micromanage the engineering sprints.
Okay, so what is it?
The goal is ensuring that the structural benefits of the innovation are distributed equitably. The innovation can still be driven by private enterprise, but the licensing of the foundational models or the use of the public data corpus requires an equity transfer back to the public trust.
I see.
It's about aligning the incentives so that a breakthrough in autonomous coding doesn't just mint a new trillionaire, but simultaneously fully funds the public school system in a given state.
Which perfectly transitions us into the final major pillar of the analysis.
Education.
Yes. Because if we change how we work and we change who owns the wealth generated by automation, we have to completely demolish and rebuild how we prepare humans for reality. We have to talk about education, the empathy premium, and the gift of time.
The source material is quite scathing in its critique of the traditional industrial education model.
Very scathing.
The current system was engineered in the late 19th century to prepare citizens for bureaucratic and industrial economies. Students sit in rows, adhere to strict bells, memorize static facts, and specialize in narrow, siloed fields.
Factory training, basically.
Exactly. The implicit promise is that if you memorize enough specific knowledge, you will secure a stable profession for 40 years.
But that model is entirely bankrupt now. Rote memorization is useless. When every student has a device in their pocket, they can access the sum total of human knowledge, and an AI agent capable of synthesizing it flawlessly in 2 seconds.
Right.
So the text highlights a completely new set of premium skills. If the machine is executing the statistical analysis and writing the code, what is the human doing?
The human is doing the things that require lived context.
Like what?
Adaptability, creativity, interdisciplinary thinking, emotional intelligence, ethical reasoning, complex collaboration, trust building, authentic human communication.
The empathy premium.
Yes, the empathy premium. There is a profound irony here that the author highlights beautifully. A society that has been obsessed for a century with pure efficiency, quantification, and automation will eventually reach a point of absolute technological saturation.
Right.
And at that exact moment, it will rediscover that the most scarce, valuable commodity on Earth is humanity itself. The skills that are the hardest to automate, genuine empathy, cultural nuance, leadership, the ability to look someone in the eye and build trust, will command the highest premium in the new economy.
Which means we need a model of permanent lifelong learning. You don't just graduate at 22, hang a piece of paper on your wall, and coast.
Definitely not.
You will be continually retraining as AI accelerates the evolution of different industries. But the text throws up a massive flashing warning sign here for policymakers.
A very important warning.
It strongly cautions against the incredibly naive political rhetoric of just telling everyone to learn to code.
Oh, that political talking point has done immense damage.
Huge damage.
The idea that we can just take a displaced 50-year-old logistics manager or a 45-year-old paralegal and seamlessly transition them into a machine learning engineer through a 6-week boot camp is mathematically and practically absurd.
It really is.
The scale of the coming cognitive disruption will far exceed the capacity of the tech sector to absorb displaced professionals.
And beyond that, AI itself is already writing better code than most junior developers.
Exactly. Pushing the masses into coding is preparing them for a job that the AI will fully automate in 3 years.
So what does this all mean? If we can't all be prompt engineers, and we aren't all needed to grind away for 40 hours a week just to keep the GDP growing, we arrive at the most hopeful concept in the entire document.
Shared productivity.
Shared productivity. We are talking about the 4-day work week, job sharing, and drastically reducing working hours while maintaining stable, livable pay.
Think about it. If AI is truly a monumental leap in efficiency, why on earth should the default societal assumption be mass unemployment and suffering?
Right.
Why shouldn't the default be a drastic reduction in mandatory labor hours for everyone?
I look at the historical parallel, and it gives me a tremendous amount of hope. Despite the horrors of its early decades, the Industrial Revolution eventually gave us the weekend.
It did.
It gave us child labor laws, paid vacations, and the 8-hour workday. The AI revolution shouldn't give us a permanent underclass of desperate gig workers scrambling for algorithmic scraps.
Absolutely not.
It should give us the 4-day work week, or the 20-hour work week.
Exactly.
John Maynard Keynes predicted a century ago that by now we would be working 15-hour weeks because of technological abundance. We just kept inventing new artificial busywork to keep everyone at their desks. AI is calling our bluff.
It forces a paradigm shift in how we structure society. Instead of asking the defensive question, how do humans compete with machines, we need to be asking the expansive question,
Which is,
how can automation free people from unnecessary labor while preserving their dignity, their identity, and their economic stability?
that's the real question.
And as the text stresses repeatedly in its conclusion, this transition is not governed by technological inevitability, it is governed by political and moral choices.
The technology is merely a lever. We decide which direction to pull it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want you to reflect on your own life for a moment.
It's a tough thing to do.
It is, but think about it. How do you measure your own worth right now? Are you psychologically ready for a world where your emotional intelligence, your ability to comfort a friend, or your creativity in organizing a neighborhood event is far more socially and economically valuable than your ability to synthesize a quarterly financial report?
It requires a massive unlearning of the last century of capitalist conditioning.
It truly does. Which brings us to the crossroads. We've covered massive ground today unpacking the automation shockwave.
We really did.
We started by looking at the evaporation of the cognitive moat, realizing that advanced degrees and white-collar expertise are no longer a shield against algorithmic displacement.
Right.
And we stared down the terrifying mass of capital concentration that inevitably leads to digital feudalism if we just let the unregulated market run wild.
Then we analyzed the psychological pitfalls of universal basic income. We established that while it might prevent starvation, it is an inadequate band-aid that completely ignores the deep human need for purpose, leverage, and civic participation.
From there, we explored the radical hope of the civic contribution economy, a system where we actually validate and pay people to care for each other and maintain the human operating system.
The OS.
Right, the OS. We discussed the absolute necessity of treating AI like public infrastructure, exploring sovereign data funds to ensure public ownership of the new oil.
Crucial step.
And finally, we looked at the collapse of industrial education, pivoting toward the empathy premium and the ultimate goal of shared productivity and the gift of time.
The overarching takeaway from the entirety of this deep dive is agency. The dystopian cityscape we pictured at the beginning, the cold skyscrapers dominating the tiny orange traffic below, is only one possible destination.
Just one.
We are standing exactly at the crossroads between the hyper-centralized oligarchy and a society of shared, unprecedented technological abundance. The algorithms do not get to vote on the outcome. We do.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, building directly on what we just discussed about human identity and meaning. Let's assume we actually get this right.
Okay, best case scenario.
Best case. Let's say society makes the difficult political choices. The transition is successfully navigated, and your economic survival is permanently guaranteed through civic contribution or public AI dividends without you ever needing to log into a traditional corporate job again.
Sounds pretty good.
It does. But how will you introduce yourself at a dinner party in 10 years? If you can no longer lean on the crutch of saying, I'm an accountant or I'm a lawyer, who are you going to be?
Figuring that out, that is the real work of the next decade.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Look up from the glowing orange traffic, keep your eyes on the skyline, and we will see you next time.